This is our bi-monthly speaker series called Durango Diaries. Tonight is our 8th presentation called Tales of Immigration. Sabine Davidson was born in Germany in 1945, just months after World War II ended. She and her family escaped from East Germany and lived in numerous refugee camps as a child. At 25, she came to America as an au pair and fell in love with her future husband at the Empire State Building on her first day here. She had to move back to Germany, but her husband found a job for her as an interpreter in America, and she was able to immigrate. The process was anything but easy. She will discuss her time as a refugee, living with a wall dividing countries, and the process of immigration.
Well, I was born in Germany in 1945, and in 1954, in February, my family decided to escape from East Germany because I think in 1947, the people that won the war decided, okay, this is East and this is West. And so we ended up being on the eastern side. And my stepfather worked in a company, although all companies in East Germany belonged to the government. It didn't matter who you worked for. Anyway, they always had political meetings, and I think he had a couple of beers, and his boss said to him, now remember, tonight we have another meeting, and it was always political, and he said, you can kiss my ass. And so he was fired, and wherever he applied afterward, he never got another job. They always looked in his big black book, and they go, we don't have a job for you. So the only one that was working was my mother, and so he would always in the morning say, okay, I think I'm leaving. And she'd go, okay, goodbye then. Well, she came home, he was still there, but one day he disappeared. He was gone, and she knew he had gone to Berlin because Berlin was a free town at that time, and somehow you could get to Berlin, and if you got into the right part of Berlin, which was British, French, and American, that was the free part of Berlin, and you could go and register as a refugee. Except a lot of East Germans who tried to do that did not know what does an East Berlin policeman look like and what does a West Berlin policeman look like. So they walked up to some East Berlin policemen and go, oh, where can I go? And they went right back to East Germany and to jail or wherever. So anyway, and now my mother was, she knew that he had left. So she now had to go to the police and register him as missing. So then she started to give up our dinky little apartment, and we didn't have that much furniture, because if you wanted a piece of furniture in East Germany, you had to first save the money, and then you had to sign up at the furniture store, and then maybe in a year or so you got that piece of furniture. So we didn't have that much furniture, unless somebody else gave you something, but after the war there wasn't that much either. So anyway, and then she went to Berlin, and somehow she found him in a refugee camp. And so, so then she came back to East Germany, and we moved in with my grandma, which we had lived with before until I was 5 years old. That's when my mother married my stepfather. And my mother and I were at my stepfather's mother, and we were on the same block. It was the same building. It was just several doors down. And somebody knocked on the door, and she looked through the hole, and she said, oh, it's the police. And so she said, go in the bedroom. She closed the door, and she was all nervous. She opened the door, and she goes, yeah, what's wrong? And the policeman said, we're looking for Ursula Meerfort. And she goes, oh, let me get my passport or whatever. And he goes, well, you're not Ursula. And she goes, no, I'm Martha. And he said, oh, we're looking for Ursula. And she said, oh, that's my daughter-in-law. Well, she doesn't live here. She lives down this way. She lives with her mother down there. So anyway, he said, well, okay, I will go over there because she has to come to the police department. When he left, and in those days, policemen didn't have cars. They came by foot or with a bicycle. And so he went on the other side of this big building, and we ran, my mother and I, we ran on the back side of the building, and we ran to my grandmother's apartment, and we locked my mother in the cellar down there while the policeman came to the front, and he said, is your daughter here? And she said, no, she went to the hairdresser. Well, okay, but which wasn't true. When she comes back, she has to show up, she needs to come to the police department. And my mother never went to the police department. She packed a suitcase, threw everything in there, took my sister, and she only had house shoes at the time, I remember, and we went on the streetcar to the train station. She had to take the next train to Berlin. We were sitting in a train station restaurant and watching the door at all times, and then there was always police, there was always military, and I was always scared of anything in uniform. And we were sitting there, and a policeman came in, and so we all looked down so that they wouldn't look at us. But I don't think they were looking for my mother at that point. So anyway, she got the train, and my sister and they went to Berlin for good. They wanted to also register as refugees, and I was 8 years old, and I decided to stay with my grandma and my aunt. And so anyway, when she got to Berlin, we found out that my stepfather must have had a couple of beers, and he was wondering where she said she was also coming, and she didn't. So anyway, he tried to take the S-Bahn, which is like the underground, it's up and under, and he went into East Berlin to make a phone call. I have no idea who he wanted to call because nobody had a phone. So anyway, a policeman caught him and said, "So what are you doing here?" And then he tried really to pretend to be drunk. And they went on a train station. The policeman wanted to put him back in the train to East Germany. For some reason, the policeman was called on the telephone by somebody, and he jumped in the other train, went back to Berlin. Anyway, so I stayed in East Germany with my grandmother, and then we heard on the radio that all these children that are left behind, they will be confiscated and taken to Russia and raised communistic or something. So anyway, my grandmother also took me to West Berlin, and they had just run through the whole process of being, to see if they were spies or if they had a legal reason to be registered as refugees. So anyway, then we stayed in some big factory that was a refugee camp. One floor was all women and children under 12, and the other floors were all men and boys above 12. And there were hundreds of people. They really didn't know what to do with us anymore in West Germany. They weren't really happy to see us because there were too many leaving. So anyway, then we were accepted, and then they were flown out by an airplane, whether the French, the British, or the American military flew us out from from West Berlin over East Germany into West Germany. So there we came to another refugee camp. It was a military camp with lots of beautiful big brick buildings, I guess, built under Hitler for all the military. And so we were thousands of people there. So anyway, I think I talked too much about that part, because what I really wanted to talk about is when people in America say, oh, they should have come here legally. And nobody, I don't want to say that anybody is, what's the word here? Anyway, I think you're clueless. You are clueless if you say that, because you have no idea. I don't think anybody, and I wouldn't have an idea either, what it means to escape from your country to find a better place to live. Because coming to West Germany was not the most pleasant thing, because I'm German, and I escaped to a country that's German. I looked the same, I spoke the same language, and we were not welcome because there were too many of us, and they were afraid that we took their jobs or we took their apartments. And we spent 4 years in refugee camps, in different ones, and they weren't always the nicest ones. And the facilities, bathrooms and toilets and things was not very pleasant. So I just want to tell people that the people that come here from South America or some other countries, some of them are just desperate. If you come legally, you're not desperate. You are only desperate if you are illegal. And who wants to live in a country and be illegal? Because you constantly have to look over your shoulder. You have no rights. You sometimes don't know the language. and the culture is different. And I just heard an interview on NPR, and this lady interviewed refugees from Syria, and they said, so where do you want to go? Do you want to go to the United States? And they go, no, I want to go home. And this morning I had a call from Germany from one of my school friends, and she helps out in her town in Germany with refugees, and she said, yes, most people want to go home. They want to be in their country with their friends, their families. They don't want to be in some other country, even if it's a beautiful and nice country. Thank you.